So a lot has happened since our last video. A lot of information and a lot of secrecy. Today we will look at the more recent evidence of Robin in The Dark Knight Rises. Sometimes, when I mention that Robin may possibly be in The Dark Knight Rises, people say that there's already too many characters. Well, let's look to the August issue of SciFi Magazine and see what Jonah Nolan, co-writer of The Dark Knight Rises, had to say. Here's an excerpt from the magazine. I finally asked Jonah. Looking at Watchmen, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Iron Man 2, Spider-Man 3, and considering that The Dark Knight Rises will have Batman, Bane, and Catwoman, and Hathaway, and a host of secondary characters, is he concerned about creating a comic book movie plot that might be too cluttered as a narrative? Oh, I don't believe any of that Everyone is always looking for excuses as to why something worked or why something didn't work. Even The Dark Knight had 3 villains in it, or 6, depending on how you're counting them. It's just a question of whether you can pull it off. That's what it comes down to. I think a narrative is only as cluttered as you let it be. And if you're looking for scope and scale, you brought up the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Consider the number of characters in that, the number of different forces, and a number of different allegiances and betrayals. So, too many characters? No longer an issue since Jonah doesn't believe in that statement. And looking closer into the magazine interview, we can see what Jonah says about his role as a fan. I first approached this franchise first and foremost as a fan. I grew up loving Batman and wanting to see all these characters up on the screen. And you kind of want to see as many aspects of this character's story you can do justice to. So Jonah is a Batman fan, and he wants to see all those characters up on the screen. Now, could those characters include Robin? He also mentioned that he wants to see as many aspects of his character's story you can do justice to. Does Bruce taking on Dick Grayson, his adopted son / crime-fighting partner, count as an element that they can do justice to? Jonah had to convince his brother Christopher Nolan to put Catwoman in the film according to an issue of Empire magazine. Here's what Chris had to say. I was nervous about how she would fit into our world, but Jonah was very much convinced that there would be a great way to do it and eventually turned me around. Once I got my head around the idea of looking at that character through the prism of our films, saying, who could that person be in real life? We figured it out. She's a bit of a con woman, something of a grifter, a hard-edged kind of criminal. Could Jonah also have convinced Chris that Robin would work in the prism of their films? According to Forbes Online, the answer is yes. In an article that was put online yesterday titled, Is Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character in The Dark Knight Rises secretly Robin? They reveal that they believe the answer is a solid yes. Here is the article. First, you should know that nowadays, Dick Grayson's actual full name in the comics is Richard John Grayson. John Grayson was Dick Grayson's father, the father who eventually died along with Dick's mother, Mary, leading to Dick being taken in by Batman and later becoming Robin. In adulthood, Dick left Bruce's side and set out on his own with the new masked identity Nightwing. Second, you should know that in adulthood, Dick Grayson became a street cop as his daytime identity. This helped him know the city better, learn more about crime and criminals in his area, and so on. Now, we've only seen very little bit about the film character John Blake, but what we've seen is that he's a young cop whom the trailers depict assisting Batman in a fight against Bane, and Blake is shown having some sort of involvement with an orphanage / boys home. Blake also goes around drawing a little chalk bat-like symbol as a sign calling for Batman to return to Gotham, as well as apparently some kind of sign of solidarity among the resistance to Bane. The latter point is not entirely certain / clear, but the chalk bat emblem seems to definitely be used as some kind of sign among the folks resisting Bane. Okay, let's take a closer look at that chalk symbol. While that mildly resembles a bat symbol, there's something else it resembles even more. Take a gander at this. Do you see more resemblance between those two than between the chalk image and a bat symbol? I sure do. That's the strongest link, I feel, between Blake's character and Nightwing. But wait, how about a subtle little nod to Robin as well? Look at what happens if we flip the chalk bat symbol upside down. Yep, it's a bird. Mind blown. So, a cop named John who assists Batman, who uses a symbol that upside up looks like Nightwing's emblem and upside down looks like a robin bird. To top it all off, this is the final Batman film, the end of the legend, and I think Nolan wants to create a complete Batman mythology that touches on the most iconic elements of the Batman mythos. So I feel the inclusion of some sort of nod to Dick Grayson is something Nolan might really want to include. So is John Blake really Dick Grayson, using a new last name because he was adopted from that orphanage? Will this be the realistic depiction of Robin / Nightwing for Nolan's Batman universe? I think so, and I think the above evidence supports the theory pretty well. What do you think, dear readers? I have convinced you that it's at least very possible John Blake will turn out to be Dick Grayson under an adopted name. Sound off in the comments below. Okay, now going back on the knowledge that The Dark Knight Rises takes place 8 years later, the EKUM news blog placed a theory that seems to make a lot of sense. Here's an excerpt. Fast forward to Nolan's comments concerning the time detachment of this film from the end of the second. 8 years. Then the speculation really begins on all fronts. How long has Batman been underground, on the run? What effect did the events of the second film have on crime in Gotham? Was there ever any resolve? Is Harvey Dent truly dead? When does Bruce get severely injured, if at all, by the visceral Bane? So much can happen in that span of time. Then I began to ponder. You know what else can happen in that span of time? An average young man with money, a chip on his shoulder, and some serious grief-induced anger can become Batman in that span of time. If I can recall, which I can, Bruce was gone for 7 years and declared dead during his time training with the League of Shadows. With that sort of knowledge and ample field experience to back it, don't you feel Bruce, who's already looking for an out, could train a capable replacement in that amount of time? I'm sure he could. Could someone's family have been killed by a villain in the same fashion as Bruce's, leaving that same chip and motivation for vengeance? Enter the heir apparent, Dick Grayson. Now, I know we've heard declarations from Nolan about his exclusion of one Robin from his trilogy. It's been a widely speculated point of contention and one of agreement with fans not so beaten up about the fact that Nolan felt the Boy Wonder was a sidebar and would never work in the world he and his team have created. Is that a fact? If you read our post on why The Dark Knight Rises will exceed expectations this summer, and definitely should, you'll notice that I adhere to the fact that Nolan is an absolute master of misdirection. He wants to throw you off his scent, and he's never going to just hand a story to you. Where's the fun in that, right? Never has he stated, not that I've read, that Dick Grayson will not be a part of this story. Frankly, how could Nolan exclude him from this vision of Batman? Could this trilogy truly be considered complete without such an integral piece of the mythos included? Regardless of how he's been portrayed in former films and in the comics to some extent, Grayson / Robin is a part of Batman. More so, he's a part of Bruce and his overall redemption as a human being. Bruce has something to live for because of Dick Grayson. He saves Bruce. Robin saved Bruce from himself, from the depths of solitude, not to discredit Alfred and his role in Bruce's life, for throwing his life away recklessly with little regard or remorse. Now remember that you can take a look at the evidence yourself by going to the links in the description. And again, let me remind you that if anyone belongs in the penultimate trilogy, it's Robin, seeing as Robin appeared before everyone besides Gordon. He even appeared before Alfred. Batman would have been cancelled in 1939 if it had not been for Robin, whom lifted the sails of Batman. So without Robin, Batman would not exist today, and there would be no Nolan trilogy.